be living in today. The registration numbers that we have are, I think, a testament to the quality of the speakers and the topics that we've got lined up for you. So very quickly, an introduction to myself. As the slide will tell you, I'm Paul Randall. I'm the product marketing manager with the solutions business for the HP Graphics organization. I've been with HP for a little over 16 years and have had various different roles across different print sectors, from general commercial print to direct mail to packaging and most recently, again, publishing. And actually, this is the second time in my years at HP that I've been involved in a publishing role, and the last time was around 8 or 9 years ago, and it's been fascinating to see how many changes there have been since my last interactions with the publishing industry. So, you know, I, for one, are certainly looking forward to hearing and learning more about the industry insights that we'll have as we kick off these series of events. So the question then, I guess, firstly to answer is why HP, and you know, why publishing 2020 vision? So firstly, let me just kind of reinforce and highlight, HP has an entrepreneurial spirit at the core of our business. That the company vision is to create technology that makes lives better for everyone, everywhere, and it's the vision that guides everything that we do. So essentially, it's true to the original inspiration that the founders had for our organization. In short, the company mission is to keep reinventing. I think this Publishing 2020 Vision webinar series is very much adopting that forward-thinking philosophy. The webinars over the coming months will explore and discuss wide-ranging trends and dynamics that are driving change and transformation within the publishing industry. Undoubtedly, the impact of the last 6 months and the global pandemic are going to be seen for some time to come. So really across the next 6 months and across the 10 different webinars that we have lined up, you know, we're bringing together some of the industry's most informed voices to look at what the future holds for the publishing industry. And obviously, you know, the driving goal behind this series is to explore the positive changes and developments that can drive the publishing industry to 2020 and beyond. Just also then, I guess, giving you a little bit of insight into HP and our role within the publishing industry. We have been a leader in printing for the last 30 years, and for the 12 most recent years have been providing print-on-demand solutions for the publishing industry, where our page-wide industrial presses have printed over 230 billion book pages to date. So today, across a global print network of print service providers, HP Technologies is actually doing the printing on demand for many of the top 20 global publishers, covering 18 different countries, and those are numbers that will continue to increase. We estimate actually that over half of the print-on-demand market across the US and Europe is being printed on HP technology. So in short, we're very actively involved in the industry with our digital print technology. But then moving beyond that and starting to look beyond the hardware, our focus is also on the development of solutions. So we just move to the next slide. Solutions that deliver incremental value and new business opportunities. And one such solution is HP Piazza, which is essentially a solution that bridges the world of digital print with the world of publishing. And it's around driving an efficiency and supply chain improvement. So in short, it's a cloud-based system that allows a publisher to ingest their content into a virtual library and push that content out via an automated process to a global print network to be printed on demand where needed and when needed. And it's a solution that we're now seeing adopted by some of the leading global publishers worldwide. So that is our involvement in the industry, and as I said, we're really excited to be involved in these series of webinars that are upcoming. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before I introduce you to our moderator for today. We will be running until 2 o'clock British Summer Time, so for the next 53 minutes. And that time will include time for questions, which we'll have at the end, and the questions will be moderated by the HP team. So if you do have questions that you want to raise, please use the chat function at the bottom of the screen, Feel free to load those questions in as we go, as they come top of mind throughout the webinar, but we'll be answering those as we can when we get to the end of the session. So on that note, I would now like to introduce you to our moderator for today. So formerly with CNN, CNN.com and CNN International, as well as Village Voice, the Dallas Times Herald, the Bookseller, and other news media outlets, Porter Anderson is now Editor-in-Chief of Publishing Perspectives, founded and operated by the Frankfurt Book Fair of New York. So publishingperspectives.com is the daily news medium for the international trade publishing industry. So Porter is also a frequent speaker on the international publishing stage in trade shows and book vetting fairs across Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, and the Middle East. So on that note, Porter, I hand across to you.
Thanks very much, Paul. It's great being here, and thank you and thank HP for making this possible. It's good to be here. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and special thanks to our speakers, whom you'll be meeting in just a moment. Here they come up on the screen now, and I'm trying to get my video up. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing my face, but I promise you I'm actually here, and I'll be working on it as we go in. Let me just keep chatting because I don't want to eat up too much time with that technical point. At Publishing Perspectives, we're noticing an interesting parallel in what's happening right now in the world of publishing. We know it's often said that under pressure of a crisis, a leader is often not so much changed by the crisis, but revealed. The nature of what she or he can do in response to something comes to light under the pressure of the moment. And in the parallel we're seeing, the publishing industry itself in so many international markets is revealing points of strengths and weakness that we may not have seen otherwise without the pressure of the pandemic. Some of those are good to be taken advantage of and hopeful to see more clearly. And what we're doing today is not talking about the pandemic per se, but we are going to be touching on things that it brings to light, things that it helps us understand about the world we're in right now and about where publishing may be able to take advantage of things opening up to us as we go. I'm delighted that we're going to have with us Roberto Banchik, who is Director General at Penguin Random House Grupo Editorial in Mexico. Also, Thasibo Mahlape, whom I've had the pleasure of interviewing in the past, the founder of Blackbird Books in South Africa, and Pengyi, the Publishers Association of China, familiar to many of us in the international industry for the work he does, particularly with the IPA and other organizations. Along the way, what we'll be doing is this. We're going to ask each of our speakers to give us a short presentation about his or her market so that we get a sense for where things stand, what things look like, how things are going. We'll then come together for some discussion, and then we'll move to your questions at the end. And so I'd like to start by asking Roberto Banchik from Mexico to kick us off with his information on his market. Roberto, take it away.
Well, hello, good morning from Mexico City to everyone. Thank you, HP, and thank you, Publishing Perspectives, for having me with you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Porter. So I have two slides I would like to share with you about the book market in Mexico, which reflects a bit the book market in Latin America in general. First thing to say is that the Mexican book market is a big market in terms of production. More than 300 million units books are produced almost every year. This has been very stable along the years, at least before 2020, this was the case. Most of this is production done by the government. This is a particularity of the Mexican book market. The government, the state, has a huge participation within it. Over 50% of all books produced are produced by the state or are produced by private publishers for the government. And that's almost 30% of all books produced. So private publishing, trade marketing, trade books in general in Mexico are only about 16% of the books published. There's 130 million units that are produced by private publishers, with 275 million, depends on the exchange rate, of course. When it devalues, it's less. When it overvalues, it's more. But it's around 275 million, 300 million a year in the private trade market. The Mexican book market also is a very concentrated market in nonfiction. I'm talking about trade here. So almost or over 40% of all books read in Mexico and sold in Mexico are nonfiction. This makes it a bit different to other markets that are measured, for example, by Nielsen Bookscan. And about 27% is children's. This has changed a bit throughout COVID. There's many new titles into the market, about 10,000 new ISBNs every year into the Mexican market, which are both Mexican original local ISBNs, together with other countries that publish in Spanish, like Spain and Argentina, that make their way to Mexico. In general terms, just in trade marketing, in the trade market, in the trade book market, it's very concentrated with several large international publishers, with Penguin Random House having 1/4 of the market in Mexico. And this is also true probably for most of Latin America. And the other large player is a Spanish publisher called Grupo Planeta, with about 15% of the market. Just a brief note about COVID and what it has done to the Mexican market. It has had a huge impact. Mexico, as Brazil, as the US, it seems to me, did not prepare too well for the pandemic. There's over 70,000 dead in Mexico alone. And this has also had a huge reflection in the economy, and particularly in the publishing sector. The drop in sales since the pandemic, since January to August, has been over 30%. And even though it's recovering a bit, it's the toll has been quite high for sales, book sales in Mexico. So if you want to pass to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit more about the trends and what has been happening. Just a brief note on the size of the Mexican market and of the Spanish market in general. It's quite large. More than 450 million people speak Spanish in the Americas. This includes the United States, of course, with a large Hispanic market. If we include Spain in addition to these numbers, then it's probably over 500 million people that speak Spanish. So it's a huge market actually. Of this, Mexico is over 1/4 of all. So it is, with Spain, the largest market in Spanish. Of course, because of this, it has a huge educational market, especially in Latin America, where still the population pyramid has not yet been inverted, and the young are still a huge part of the population. One of the biggest mega trends that we've had in Mexico for the past years, but specifically during this year and during the pandemic, is the rise of digital in all its forms. And I'm sure this has happened probably almost everywhere. Ebook readership grew quite a bit, especially in the first months of the pandemic, probably over 35% compared to last year. And the same happened to audiobooks. These two categories, well, ebooks have been very stable in the past years and a very low percentage of sales in the Mexican and Latin American markets, but it certainly grew quite a bit. And audio is a category that has been growing quite a bit in the past years, and it definitely exploded with the pandemic. One huge mega trend in Latin America in general, in Mexico in particular, is the rise of this non-reader digital young people that are reading not the traditional books that we were used to, not classic books and not necessarily fiction, but are reading what we call influencers. And this is very young people that are very popular in the social media, in YouTube, in TikTok, in Instagram, etc. And books from them are reaching quite large amounts of sales, something we have not seen. And these are not necessarily common readers, but new readers into the market. And this, I think, is a source of being hopeful about the future. So the young and the youngest are reading a lot more than we have seen. And then finally, and probably in addition to English language books being read a lot more in Latin America, and this has been a trend in the past years as education has increased. What has increased the most, and it's probably transforming the publishing sector most in Mexico, is not so much digital books, ebooks and audio, but physical books being sold online. So this has grown from a very small 5% of sales as a channel for sales in Mexico to over 20% at this point in time. So this has revolutionized really the book market and traditional book selling in Latin America, as books from all over the world in Spanish and English are arriving in Mexico through, of course, the biggest online channels. So in general terms, this is just an overview of the Mexican market. I'll leave my colleagues to talk about their markets. I hope I didn't take that much of a time, Porter.
Well, that was terrific. Thank you, Roberto. It's good to hear all of this information. Can you let me do a quick follow-up with you? In terms of that explosive growth in audiobooks, 71% jump in a year, is there enough inventory in the Spanish language in terms of audiobooks to satisfy that large a listenership?
Of course, there wasn't a few years ago, but for the past 2 years, I would say, 2018, 19, and certainly this year, all publishers, especially the biggest ones and the international ones like Penguin Random House and Planeta, we've invested a lot in audiobooks. We're producing, I mean, probably we have a catalog of over 1,000 audiobooks and a production of over 100 audiobooks a month between all the countries in Latin America. It's interesting because the language is the same, the accents are different, very much like the US, the UK, and Australia, which is the same language but very different languages. So we have to make audiobooks according to the specific market. So it's not the same to make an audiobook for Argentina than to do it for Spain or for Mexico.
Right, quite laborious, but congratulations. That is a lot of production. Thank you so much, Roberto. Pengyi, will you speak to us now about your observations on China?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm deeply honored to be at this webinar, a great gathering of book lovers and readers on this special autumn day. I would like to thank take this opportunity to thank HP Publishing Perspectives, as well as my friend Emma House, for inviting me to attend and address this webinar on behalf of Chinese publishers. Great changes have taken place in all fields of undertakings in China in the past decades. Publishing industry in China has also come a long way. Now I would like to take this opportunity to say something about the present situation of China's book publishing market and the key characteristics that they may influence the future trend of Chinese publishing. In the slide on display, you can see some key numbers about China's book publishing. Based on these numbers, I would like to share my opinions with you on the crucial factors that may influence the future of the industry. Firstly, China is a big publishing power based on market size. Our country highly regards the development of both education and culture, together with the rapid growth of our GDP and the strong demand. People in China have more books to read and more opportunities to get better education. Secondly, thanks to the policy of reform and open up, China has become an important part of the international publishing industry. Meanwhile, foreign publishers brought their advanced publishing concept, premium content, and competitive marketing to China. All these contributed to the present prosperity of China's publishing industry. I just want to take a textbook series named New Standard English as an example. Co-authored and published by Macmillan Education in Great Britain. Of course, now it is a part of the German company. And the Foreign Language Teaching and Research Press in Beijing. The series has been a tremendous success among Chinese primary and secondary schools. The total sales of this series has reached 1 billion copies, and it is still growing year by year. And thirdly, along with the development of new technology, China's publishing industry is becoming more diversified. Digital publishing is one of the most distinguished segments. In the year 2018, the gross revenue of China's digital publishing industry, including e-books, online education, games, etc., was $120 billion, an increase of 18% over the previous year. Being another significant part of the digital publishing, the online literature is also growing rapidly. In the year 2019, the gross revenue of online literature reached to $2.9 billion with over 450 million readers. More than that, the IP realization from online literature, like gamification and film adaptation, occupies nearly 30% of the gross revenue of this industry. To sum up, based on the large population and the growing demand by the people in this country, education and culture are flourishing together with our publishing industry. Thank you. I welcome questions, of course.
I unmuted myself. There we go. Thank you again, Pengyi. In terms of online literature in China, which is so popular, is there a connection between that and the success of digital retail? Do you feel that the readers, being so accustomed to the online literature tradition, which I think in the West we might think of as something akin to Wattpad, for example, out of Canada, did that prepare the readership and the consumer base, if you will, for digital commerce? Are they able to buy online more easily because of that?
Yes, of course. They can easily buy their products from the online literature. And this is also has something to do or very related to the digital publishing.
Very good. Very interesting. I think that synchronicity is very important. Thanks so much again. And now, Thasibo, could we turn to you, please, to talk to us from South Africa?
Hi, I must say I'm a little dizzy from everyone else's numbers because they're so huge. And I'm wondering which visa I should be applying to move. I need to leave urgently.
You're welcome here. Come over.
Please. So look, I think before I start talking about the publishing industry here in South Africa, is that the one context that is always very important to remember when you talk about South Africa is just how racially charged everything still is. So the socio-economic inheritance of apartheid still plays a very big role in terms of how the publishing looks and what publishing is, basically. So the three big sectors, that's education, where everyone's losing their hair, making lots of money, but losing a lot of hair. Then there's trade, which I speak to, and then there's academic, and I mean, they, largely keep to themselves. So in 2018 to 19, The revenue, total revenue was 3.5 billion in rands. And you will see on the slides, I'm not gonna try and translate all those big numbers that you guys have. So it's 3.5 billion in revenues. And because of how the publishing still is structured here, a lot of that money goes out of the country. It doesn't stay here. It does not contribute to our economy because of the top 5 publishing, forces here in South Africa, 60% is still international. And of the remaining, the biggest one, deals largely with distribution for international publishers. So there's very little money that remains here of the amount that you see up on screen. We've got 3 major retailers, and because of the apartheid spatial planning, they are very, they're in areas that are very exclusive to the majority of the country. And as a result, we do have only about 14% of the population reading for pleasure, or who have books in their houses that are meant for pleasure and not for education and for academic purposes. And we have, we sell 3,000 copies of a fiction title, and that's a bestseller for us. And 5,000 is nonfiction, and nonfiction, I think, like in Mexico, is our biggest winner here. People want to read celebrity memoirs. They are by far the biggest selling, followed very closely by political scandals. And because South African, politicians are really dishing it up at the moment, it's book after book after book of like, some books really ought to have just been newspaper exposés, but they get published. But so those are the big, people that do the big numbers. When you are like us, as a small publishing house whose interest is really to generate new careers and give new voices platforms, then of that 3.5 billion rand, we're not even there. We're not even making 1/000th of that. It's very tough. And we don't have a lot of e-retailers, even for physical books. So the book selling still is very physical here. We don't have a lot of e-retailers, and the digital divide obviously, is a reason for that. Not everyone in the country has a credit card to be buying online, or where they can afford to, not everyone can always shoulder the costs that come with delivery costs that come with buying online, that are unavoidable, unfortunately. So we pretty much still depend on people walking on foot traffic, people walking into stores to buy books. Although I have realized that because I was an imprint of Jacana Media before, then went independent this year, and I realized that it's probably also an age thing. So we have a predominantly much younger market, and we've seen that through our e-commerce, that we're selling a lot more than we are selling in physical stores. So that's something that's happening there. And I think a big part of what's wrong with our industry is just how it's just too many old people. And we need to be making space for younger voices to come in and see how we're going to change the space, and also kind of, prepare the country and the continent to become the super emerging power that I think it could be. I think all these negatives that I mentioned, as much as they are depressing for us that are practicing here, are really also things that make me hopeful, because it means we have that much more to build towards. If we have nothing now, there's so much that we can do. There's so much room for us to go into. And so, like I said, with the racial inequality happening in South Africa, and a lot of the publishing houses really having only white publishing editorial committees, a lot of Black people, Black writers have now started self-publishing as a rebellion to that. As a result, we've got a booming self-publishing, part of the business that is largely unaccounted for in the numbers because the selling is informal, but it's really kind of, I think, shaken everyone up to realize that there are Black readers and they're Black writers, but they're just not being catered for in the moment. And again, I do think that it speaks to just how much more we can go and how far we can take this, both, you know, from here and in the continent.
Myself, I've done it again. Now I'm unmuted. Here we are. Thasibo, thank you again. What you were just saying was making me want to ask, when you see this rise of self-publishing going on among the Black authors, are you able to access some of that material for Blackbird books? Are you actually finding content? Some of our publishers in several other markets are watching the self-publishing scene to see where some good piece of work is moving that they can then take into the traditional industry. Do you find that there's content out there available to you that way?
I find ideas more than content.
Right.
It gives one food for thought. Because my big thing is, how do we grow the space for new voices and new talent? Right. So if you've already been able to launch yourself successfully that way, I'm not coming after you because you already have a foot in. You know, so what it does in terms of, I think what it's taught me mostly as a publisher is just the kind of subjects that people want to read on. And I think they've been able to kind of knock it out perfectly. We have approached, traditionally, we have approached publishing as a highbrow, elite, you know, environment, and we're leaving everyone out in the cold. And if I think back myself of how I became a reader and how I was reading Mills and Boon, and how I practically read every Danielle Steele, which I can't stand now. And you know, the thing is, we have to allow everyone their Mills and Boon. We have to allow, and here especially, because people are only just starting to come into reading. People, you know, you're finding a Black middle class that suddenly has a little bit of extra cash to spend at the end of the month. And we must allow people their Mills and Boon. We must allow them their Danielle Steele and whatever else falls into that genre.
This is fascinating. Is there less interest right now? One more question for your market. Is there less interest right now, perhaps, in African authors, in African voices, than in imports, or more? Can you see a shift in that balance?
Oh no, the market is definitely, I mean, we are going through, Black South Africans are going through a very big Black consciousness, you know, moment. And so people are really, you know, Black readers are saying, we want to read just African content, or we want to read more African content. But I think what they're not realizing is that if you're reading Chimamanda, you're not actually contributing to the African economy. So that's the big thing is people are reading. So they will read a lot of the kind of, you know, internationally published African writers. They are reading them, but they just don't realize that African literature is not contributing to the African publishing economy.
Interesting. I see exactly the point you mean. Difficult too. Difficult. That's an educational issue. Yeah, in terms of educating the consumer. Thank you very much. That's a terrific presentation. I want to ask each of our panelists now. We'll go around. Alberto, can you put your finger on something that has been revealed during the pandemic experience in the Mexican market that either reveals itself as a pain point, as something of difficulty, or as an opportunity? What has been brought to light in Mexico during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yes, of course. I think very similar to South Africa, Mexico, and again, I'd speak also for Latin America, I think, depended largely on physical bookstores and on people walking into bookstores and finding the books. For about 2 months, all bookstores were completely closed. And now that it's opening a bit, we still find that almost 30% of all points of sales in the country just didn't open. And we have no idea if they'll open or not. And so this has been quite a pain point for all publishers, since what we found is that there has been a lot of demand for books during the pandemic, but the channels were closed and we didn't have the ability to make the books reach the readers. So this again became later on an opportunity that I think most of us have grabbed, which is the online physical book sales, which as I mentioned, have grown quite a bit. And not only because of the biggest retailers in online like Amazon, but also local bookstores have made quite a fast transformation into online and starting to sell online. There's of course distribution costs, which Thasibo mentioned, and that's a bit hard to tackle with. But online sales have grown a lot, and I think this is a trend that has come to stay. And it's good news for publishers because we can now also sell directly through our online channels to readers and consumers. It's not so good news to traditional booksellers, which will find that they have to change completely. They have to professionalize. They have to include technologies. They just have to switch the chip in their business models in general.
This is fascinating. I think you're reflecting something that we've seen in several markets, and that as valiantly as bookstores were trying to make deliveries through couriers and other means during the worst of the lockdown era, the online commerce and was really what was able to push even the hard copies out. As you're saying, the print material could still move. And this was quite a revelation, I think, especially for folks who have been quite resistant to e-commerce. Suddenly it looked pretty good when that was the revenue source. So this is a fascinating evolution, and I like how you're talking about taking advantage of it. I do think there are things that can be developed there, particularly selling direct online to consumers. Very important. Thank you for that. Pengyi, can you put your finger on something that has really stood out in China in response to the pandemic? I think you might be muted, Pengyi. You're doing my trick. Can you check and see if you're, there we go. Try again.
Yes. Is it okay now?
Yes, good. Thank you.
Yes.
We hear you.
Yes. And in the first half of the year, the retail market is very, very damaged by the pandemic. And but now the online retail increased 7%, but of course the traditional bookstores are damaged very much, and I should say more than 40% books are decreased. And now, of course, and we take a lot of measures to, for instance, through online, the online purchase is very good, and so our retail market is as good as before the pandemic.
This is good to hear. I think it's fascinating how your consumer base responds to various stimuli too. In our China bestsellers series, we update every month with bestseller lists from China at Publishing Perspectives. We always note that the educational system is driving sales in the trade, and that students are reading from curriculum lists coming out of the school programs. Has that level of educational reading helped to support sales during the otherwise damaging effects of the pandemic?
Yes, of course. The education readers grows rapidly. And of course, the students at home read quite a lot of books by purchasing from the online. And we publish quite a lot of students, readers, and of course, quite a lot of books from abroad. For instance, the Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press readers sold so many copies. Yes.
Very good. Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thasibo, your turn. Can you put your finger on something related to the pandemic in South Africa, especially interesting?
So, I mean, I initially thought that the pandemic had been very damaging to the book industry here, but we had a South African book week last week, which ran with, together with the South African Book Fair, and there was one of the panels there was on economic impact of COVID, and it would seem that we weren't really that impacted, as the economists said. Which to me, I find a little strange because, I don't know that bookshops are staying afloat. They're not really forthcoming with that information. But I had a meeting this morning with a representative with the second biggest chain in the country. And she actually said that it's booming. She said that the lockdown had seen increased sales for them. And as a result, they're very hopeful for Christmas. So we individually as a company, we have managed to kind of use the backlist to come up with innovative ideas of how to, and we're selling direct to consumers. And so what we're doing is we're trying to be innovative in how we're selling to the consumers. And we've seen quite a lot of traction in that way. But I don't know how the big publishers are coping. We're small, so we're able to adapt quickly. And I think it's a lot harder for bigger publishers who've always been able to get by with big public marketing budgets, taking over the stores and all of that, and suddenly needing to come up with something a little bit better. They're trying. I see a lot of book events, but I think in the beginning of the pandemic, that was kind of exciting, but I think now people are a bit fatigued. So I don't know that they're moving books in the way that they thought that they would. But, well, look, the economists say we haven't been hit hard.
This is very interesting. We are seeing this parallel in some other markets too. The American market is doing far better than expected at this point. But I think what you're talking about has parallels also for the large publishers who now have postponed many releases and are looking at a collision ahead, which may be quite damaging. I love your concept of using your backlist and surfacing that for the readers. I think there's such value in backlist, and often there's not even a chance to utilize it as perhaps you're getting at now. So congratulations. I think that's very canny. We're getting close to the time we want to start with questions, but I'd just like to go around quickly with one more quick answer, if you will, please, from each of you. Since we're talking about your emerging markets as superpowers, which they are in their own rights, each one of you, what is, if you had a superpower in your market, what would you say it is? What is your secret sauce, as we say? Roberto, can you tell us about what that would be in Mexico?
Well, I think being the largest Spanish speaker country in the region, that in itself is a power that the Mexican publishing sector has. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the blessing, in a sense, not always, not all the time, of bordering with the US and having in the US such a huge Hispanic population and readership. Maybe not as big as one would expect, but quite big. As big as any other country in Latin America, almost. That is certainly something that Mexico can take advantage of. There's a free trade agreement between the US and Mexico, and we can export a lot of books. So Mexico, in a sense, can become, it slowed down, and it will again, I think, become an export market to the Hispanic Americas. Not so much to Spain. Spain is a very insular economy and a very insular publishing sector. They read translations and Spanish Castilian books. So there's not much imports from Latin America to Spain, which I imagine is the same with Australia and South Africa into the UK, for example. Now, there might be a lot of local production, but it doesn't reach the UK. But certainly within the Americans, export is something that Mexico can truly take advantage of. in the future, not only physical, but also, of course, with ebooks and audio.
Fantastic. I love that. The language as superpower. That's terrific. Congratulations on that. Pengyi, what is the Chinese superpower?
The population and the policy of opening up to the outside world could be unique, strong points in the Chinese book market. The large population, combined with the rapid growth of our GDP, brings the stronger demand and purchasing power to Chinese people. And the reform and open up policy enables Chinese readers to work with the excellent international publishers so that more titles could be published here in the Chinese market.
Fantastic. Good answer. The size of market always works. Thank you, Pengyi. Thasibo, the South African superpower.
You know, Porter, I went to the Frankfurt Book Fest for the first time last year. Thank God for this. And you know, when I got there and I saw just how many white men there were, that was the first time I think I realized that there's lots of money in publishing, because white men don't say there's no money. And so I realized right then and there, because it came back and I had to reflect a lot and think about where we were going as South Africa and as the continent. And I think the superpower that we have as South Africa is that in the continent, we probably have the most sophisticated publishing system. And if we are able to use that to create an interconnectedness in the continent, that we would be probably one of the biggest markets as a continent. You know, I think we're definitely not going to do it by ourselves. But I think, and just to see internationally just what a demand, the kind of demand there is for African stories currently, is if we use our superpower, which is the, you know, the fact that we still have all these opportunities to explore, to create that strong fort of, you know, African stories and guard it and make everyone else come here for African stories instead of African stories being, you know, begging to be included internationally. So I think our superpower lies in, you know, the many opportunities that still exist for us to mine, as opposed to other more established markets who, you know, most probably reached a ceiling or are very close to reaching a ceiling. Our ceiling is still quite a long way off.
This is a fascinating concept, the consolidation of the African market with the leadership of South Africa because of its sophistication in publishing. This is very sensible. Very hard to do. I'm sure there's a lot of work ahead, but that is a fascinating vision, as we're saying, for their series itself. I mean, this is really something to look at. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. I think we're at the point now where we want to start taking some questions. And I believe, Emma, if I understand correctly, that Paul is going to come to us with the first question, right?
Yes.
There he is.
So,
Hi, Paul. Welcome back.
So again, my thanks for everybody for the contribution today. It's been wonderfully insightful, and there's been a really broad range of input and perspectives. So listening to a lot of the comments and the insight that was shared, I was particularly keen to hear about a few things. I think Thasibo, you talked about kind of younger readers. I think Roberto, you talked about the influence of Instagrammers and social media kind of content providers. I'm just thinking about the context of the physical book and the digital environment that, you know, we're living in today, whether you would see that there'd be any kind of change in the format of physical books moving forward. When you've got this kind of increasingly blended environment, when you've got perhaps this younger readership coming to the fore, perhaps wanting to engage with content in slightly different ways, I just wondered, it's a little bit of a crystal ball question, I guess, but whether you see the physical format and how books are created or put together, whether you see that changing, developing, moving forward to suit that younger readership.
You know, for us, Paul, it's been very interesting that even with the younger readership, that for say 1,000 physical books, we sell about 10 ebooks. So it's not happening for us. I don't see it happening in the next 5 years, but of course, it would be completely stupid for us not to plan for it. So we don't want to be taken by surprise in case there is like, you know, like an overwhelmingly quick turn from the market, but it's not, you know, with audiobooks, with ebooks, we're just not there yet in South Africa and as the continent, but it would be incredibly stupid for us to not plan for it.
I hear what you're saying, and that's an excellent question. Thank you for that, Paul, and thank you, Thabiso. In fact, that ties into something we're getting from one of our audience members here, saying, asking about audiobooks in South Africa. Thabiso, the specific question coming from one of our viewers here is, could audio tackle accessibility and literacy issues in the African markets? Not at this point.
Not right now. We can't even get stable internet. You know, everywhere. I have to be here in my house to be able to do such events. If I go to my father's house, which is in a different province, I can't connect to the internet like this. I'd be shaky and wavy by now. So we don't have stable internet. We still have, I mean, today they released just the most depressing stats on what average people in South Africa earn. And just not happening for us yet. It's for that kind of digital element to work, people need devices, people need credit cards, people need to actually have good credit to be able to access them. And it's not going to fix it for us just yet.
Infrastructure issues, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Pengyi, our audience member, is also asking about audiobooks in China and what kind of traction you see there.
Yes, audiobooks in China are very popular. For instance, we have a very large company called Himalaya. And this, this company, of course, mainly focus on the audiobooks. And of course, for their trade books, yes, quite a lot of young people will listen the books from Himalaya.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Roberto, I know we've spoken in Mexico about the audiobook situation and its very fast growth. Do you see that level of growth being sustainable? I mean, 71% in a year is even bigger than the double-digit growth we like to talk about in the UK and the US. That's huge. Can that be sustained?
Well, it's huge because it departs from a smaller base.
Because it's new in a sense.
It's in a sense it's new. I think like in South Africa, physical books won't go away. Digital is growing in Mexico. Internet is much more stable. Much more people are having internet at home and their offices, but still physical, I'd say, would still be between 70 and 75% of the market for the next years. What we have seen is that ebooks and audio and ebook grew a lot during the months of the pandemic. But as bookstores are opening again, the proportion of sales in ebooks are going down a bit. So physical, I think, it won't ever leave, at least not in the next few years, which is something that we've seen. We've expected physical to leave for the past 10, 15 years, and it just hasn't happened. But having said that, I do think that in absolute numbers, audio will keep on growing. It's our fastest growing category in terms of format. And I think it just appeals to a very different audience than normal physical books. Himalaya, for example, just opened in Mexico.
Right. And this is fantastic. It's something we're watching in all of the markets too that you've touched on. The pandemic bump, if you will, for digital, does it last? How many e-readers are suddenly going, I like a book that glows in the dark, I'm going to keep reading this way. How many go back to print? How many start listening? How many go back to print? This is a fascinating next step, the other shoe to fall, if you will, that we're watching to see how much of this is sustained after the era of the pandemic. Next question we're getting from our audience here. Thabiso, how do authors self-publish in South Africa? Is there an Amazon system? Is there a KDP, as we say, Kindle Direct Publishing, a major channel there?
I think there's a few of the of self-published authors have used that route, but majority of them are doing it on print. So they are either a lot of them, you know, are getting scammed because, you know, you find a printer that says, I'm going to publish your book for you, and they just take like a Word document and just kind of, you know, print and bind. But they are printing and increasingly as they get more and more exposed to the publishing world and how it works, they are getting better and better, and it's looking more and more professional, which is why I say they really have been a force to reckon with. So they're doing it physically, they're selling these books out of the boots of their cars. And what it's also created, created an informal sector of booksellers. You know, so people who, and they'll come and buy from us, big publishers as well, but they stock, you know, if they're taking 5 of each book from a publisher, but they're selling those books and they'll be able to make a living out of it. So it's kind of like a chain of events that's very interesting and very impressive to watch.
Fascinating, thank you. I think we have time for one last question from the audience. We'll take this to each of you. Can you please advise what your average trade book print run is for a typical front list and back list title in your respective countries? Roberto, what's a normal print run for a front list book in Mexico?
Fiction would probably be between 2,000 and 3,000. Nonfiction can go up to 5,000. This is an average print run. On bestsellers, it can go up to 20, 30,000 copies on the first print run. But average is between 2 and 3 for fiction, 5 for nonfiction, and probably 5,000 for children's books. Reprints are 1,000 or 2,000, depending on how much stock we want to have in the next few months.
All right, got it. Thank you. Pengyi, in China, what is the print run of a first front list book coming out?
It depends on what kind of titles they are. For instance, if a novel, a very popular novel, the first print run will be 10,000 copies, and the second print might be 50,000 copies. And nowadays, the children's books are very popular, and so the first print run might be the highest, 100,000 copies. So it's a quite a big market.
I'm remembering your Mrs. Yang, as she's called, the author of so many children's books, and her numbers are astronomical. I'm always fascinated when I have a chance to speak to her. Just listening to what she's putting out is incredible. Thank you. And Thasibo, I saw you shaking your head as you heard some of those numbers.
How do I get a Chinese residency?
You're going to talk to Pengyi right after the session. It's going to set you right up.
Look, our numbers for front list for fiction, this 1.5, maybe if the price is a little better on 2,000, you go to it, but you're also obviously measuring with your back orders as well, you know, what you've got against that title. And for nonfiction, usually, you know, if you've got faith in it and you're looking at the numbers that are coming in orders, it's about 5,000. But that is like with your celebrity memoirs, your political books. For us, I mean, bigger publishers are able to do 10,000 for a run. But when it's a literary nonfiction, I'd bring it down just a little bit, because that's not going to fly as much as a salacious celebrity memoir. So about 1.5 to 2,000 for fiction, and then nonfiction, anything 2,000 and above.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And thank you all. I'm sorry that we're out of time. We could just go on and on. This is fascinating stuff. May your superpowers serve you well, each of you, in the future as we go forward, and may we all go forward safely and healthily. Paul, thank you again for having us. Thanks to HP. Roberto, Thasibo, Pengyi, thank you so much for these comments. It's been terrific to have all of you with us in the first of the season of Publishing 2020 Vision events. And thank you, Emma, for having us all. It's great to be here. Thanks to our audience. Good to have you with us. There are more of these events coming up, and Emma will be letting you know about them, I'm sure. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day or evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you and bye.
Bye.